I'll try
Good
not.
evening. And if you're
But
just tuning in, you are listening to the Angel Rock. It's being broadcast to you live out of New Orleans, Louisiana. We're a few minutes behind. We've got to connect with the illustrious Joe Montaldo. Hasn't been back on the radio in 6 months. He owns UPRN, and he's the one that gives us this wonderful platform to come to you guys live. If you've never been to my show before, welcome. I like to feature people from all walks of life through whatever they're doing extracurricularly or can't talk tonight, professionally. I like to have them on here. They're making a positive change for humanity. A little bit about myself. All of us here are Canadian. I'm going to introduce my co-host in a sec. I'm a Canadian psychic medium, crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, a spiritual teacher and mentor. I am also a registered nurse. And tonight I have my other half, my partner in crime, the host of his own show here on Thursday nights called The Delicious Recipe. I have the Dell with me. We're going to be co-hosting tonight, right, Delly?
You betcha.
He just got his butt in the door from work, everybody. So you got to give him huge kudos because he's dragging his butt, and here he is. And tonight we have on, he's a returning guest for the Dell, but I haven't had him on my show. He's from Canada. He is a geologist, a prospector, a musician, an author, and I like to refer to him as a storyteller. Now, not storyteller of fiction, but actual true life events and the things that he's gone through. He's had a very, very interesting life. And we're going to talk about a few of those stories tonight. It's Big Jim Paris. Welcome, Jim.
hey, how are you doing?
Great. I've been looking forward to this all day, having you on here. I want to give Audrey a shout out, his beautiful wife. She's in the back room just to be able to listen. And I said to Jim, just be yourself on here tonight. That's what people connect with. Now, before we get started, everybody, I want to remind you, if you're on my Facebook profile or possibly Dell's, we won't see the comments here. So if you can, come on over to UFO Paranormal Radio on YouTube. And also, if you go to UFO Paranormal Radio, or you can type in UPRN on Facebook, we'll see your comments there. I see we got Dave Petrella here already. Welcome, Dave. So, Jim, I'm going to start out like how I normally start out with people. Now, I know you've talked about some of this on Dell's show, but prospecting, how did you get into that? What made you decide to do that, and geology as well?
Well, the short answer is I had no choice.
That's what you told me off air, last week. So when you say you had no choice,
My grandfather came back from World War I, and he was badly wounded, couldn't get
right?
a job. And so he got in a canoe and paddled from Saskatoon up to northern Manitoba.
Oh, wow.
And luckily for our family, he found a gold mine up there.
Okay.
That's a story for another night. But
you know what I want to ask you, and Dell and I ask this question a lot, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is what makes gold so important, right, Dell? We've always wondered that, like, who picked that gold had all this value and all this worth? Like, do you know anything about that? Like, why it was gold, why it wasn't something else?
well, first of all, gold is fairly rare compared to like iron ore or copper. The copper they measure in millions of tons, where gold they measure in ounces. So gold has a special allure. It's an enormously individualistic metal. The Royal Bank Tower in Toronto has gold inlaid in all the windows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it shuts out the rays. You can take an ounce of gold and you can stretch it into a long line of over a mile long, that you can stretch gold. So it's got all these amazing qualities. But for me as a prospector, when you're drilling, when you're banging rock in a trench, and you see gold in its native form, 24 is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
4-carat gold. I mean, I can see why people lust for gold. It's a beautiful material. There's nothing else that can come close to it. Platinum, palladium, cobalt, copper, zinc, any of the other elements. They all have their own little place in the world. But gold, native gold, is a very serious eye catcher.
This is one part that I found was sort of interesting is that, well, there's gold all around the world in different
Hmm.
countries, and I noticed that when you go and get gold from like South America or through the Caribbean, because they sell a lot of gold, it's a really different type of gold. It's not
Hmm.
the same color yellow.
Yeah, well, all gold has silver with it to begin with.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
yeah, you will never find gold without silver. They're always together, just like an amalgam. And then where you get the vagaries come in is like, for instance, in the Black Hills in the Dakotas there, if you have some copper with it, that's when you get the tricolored gold. Uh,
Ooh.
I've got rings and I've got other jewelry that have that tricolored gold. So, yeah, I mean, they call the copper an impurity, but it actually gives it more of an orange color. But if you have a lot of silver, then it'll be a very light colored gold. If you don't have a lot of too much silver, then you'll have a very lustrous, beautiful, orangey, bright colored gold. And another thing I can tell you is that that's how they used to catch the high graders that stole gold out of the mine.
Okay.
Is every mine has a ratio of gold and silver. It could be 10 parts silver and 1 part gold. Another mine could be 18 parts. And so you can measure this by assaying it. And so if some miner gets caught with a bunch of gold and he says, oh, well, I
I found
found
it.
this. Yeah, I found this beside the road or whatever. And they take the gold and they assay it and they measure it and they say, well, what a coincidence. This gold happens to come from the same mine that you work in. You're under arrest.
Well, there was some
Excuse me.
interesting stories about gold. Well, we're getting a little bit of scratching. I hope that's not
Oh,
my
it's
mic.
me. I forgot I got my crystal on. Go ahead. I'll take it
Okay,
off. Sorry.
but there was a thing, and I think you told me stories, and I've read about a bunch of the stuff there where people would go and pepper the mine, right? They'd go and spray or with a shotgun full of gold shot and that, and to get investment. Like that was sort of. I guess there's a lot of con men out there when it goes with the gold and stuff like that to sell things. I guess, eh?
Well, I mean, I have heard of that being done. I've never done it myself, but
Mm-hmm.
that'd be interesting. I guess you'd have to load the shotgun shell with some gold and some powder and make it into a real live shell. And then you'd go to the face of the rock underground or maybe in a trench on surface and fire the shotgun. And that'd be be interesting to see the reaction of
Right.
what would
But
happen.
it, but wasn't it okay? I'm not sure if this is the right one, or wasn't it Briex or something like that, where they had fudged the geology records, saying that there was more gold per ton than what was really there. Was that the Briex one, or is that
Well, Briex was salted. That's true. There's no doubt about it. They've proven it now, and of course that led to some people say it was $6 billion, $8 billion stock fraud.
right?
But the truth of the matter is there was gold there, but it wasn't gold that was on the property. It was gold from other properties in the same country that the Dayak miners were doing mining the streams and
Right.
getting and what's his name de Guzman, one of the head geologists or worked for the head geologist. He was buying this gold from the Dayak miners and then sprinkling it in with the core, the Briex core.
I want to just read Dave Petrella's. I do that here, Jim. I'll highlight the comments at the bottom, and I like to read them. I always tell people that join in live here, they're part of the Angel Rock family, and I like to include the comments. And Dave Petrella says, when you're talking about gold and silver, always together. He said, gold and silver, the sun and the moon, always together and complementary. Is interesting. Now, you know what? We have a million things that we can talk about tonight. I noticed you were tuning your guitar because you are a musician. I actually re-listened to some Adele shows that he did with you. Um, Now, we have to remind people because this is going out all over the world, so they may not understand when we talk about small towns like Timmins and whatever, but most people will know who Shania Twain is. Now, you knew her family, did you not?
Yes,
Hmm.
well, I never knew her natural father, but her stepfather, Jerry
Hmm.
Twain, he
Hmm.
worked for us in the bush. I mean,
Okay.
we used to employ a lot of fellas in, doing different kinds of work, cutting lines, splitting core, and he worked for us out of South Porcupine, which is also part of Timmins now. And it was a very unfortunate when they had they were driving in a truck and they were hit by a big logging truck, which was a way bigger than their truck. They were
Right.
Hmm.
driving a panel truck, and unfortunately, both he and Shania's mother were killed in the accident.
Oh,
That's
her
when
name was Eileen back then, though, right?
her name was Eileen. Yes, that's very true. And when she first signed the contract, first signed the deal with the Kasner family, uh, Bob Kasner and his wife. I'm trying to think of all the names here, but her name was Eileen at that time. And then later on, when she recorded her first album, she chose an Ojibwe name, Shania.
Hmm.
So, I can't say that I know Shania personally, but I
Hmm.
certainly know of her,
Knew her family.
yeah.
I'm
And
just gonna just one sec, Jim. I'm gonna say hi to Zach Man. He says, "Good afternoon, my friends. About to have dinner and enjoy a great show." Hey, Zach, welcome. I'm glad you're able to tune in. We're a little bit. I should remind people too. This is my new permanent time slot, everybody. So it is 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern. So I'm hoping more people will be able to tune in, listen to some of the great guests that we've got lined up for you. Um, I know you were tuning up your guitar, Jim, because you write quite a few songs. So what do you base your songwriting on? What do you what I guess inspires you? Because you wrote 50 songs, you told me off air during COVID, right?
yes, I did. And, all songwriters are always listening for little hook lines. And
Like the Queen of Free, like I told you.
yeah, right. The Queen of Free. I'm going to throw that into a song one of these days.
I
But
can't wait.
but you're always looking for what songwriters call a hook line, and a lot of the songwriters I know that when somebody says something off the cuff, or I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example, but right away they'll get out a scrap of paper, or if they're eating supper or something, write it on a napkin, and pretty well all songwriters have a, a basket full of all these little pieces of paper that they picked up over the years, and then they go back, and when they're going to write a song and they go through their little scraps of paper, and this was a catchy she's a there's one song out right now in the bluegrass genre that Sadie, she's a pistol, which is an expression of I wouldn't say a hot chick, but
Yeah.
I mean, she's a firecracker.
Yep.
Right.
Sadie, she's a pistol. That's the hook line.
Uh-huh.
I've got tons of hook lines. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to just sing you a few verses of a song that I picked up from a fella in Arkansas. And if what I'm curious is, I used to play this song at a lot of the music venues down in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, right on,
Okay.
right on the border with Mexico. And it turned out over the years it was pretty well my most requested song. People used to come from far and wide and ask me to sing "The Blonde and the Redhead." And what was funny about it was, after I sang it a couple hundred times for over I got a little tired of singing the song. And one night I told one audience when everybody was yelling, "Jim, sing the blonde and the redhead." I'm like, I hate that song. I'm never singing it again. But then
Yeah.
I had to apologize and sing it. But I'm going to do 3 verses and a chorus. And I'd be curious to know if you get some feedback, if anybody's ever heard this song before, because it's a very unique song in my
Well,
mind.
your genre is bluegrass, right? But Del, you should before Jim starts, you should tell him what you guys do every summer, right?
Oh yeah, we do this little
Excuse me.
little concert out at out where our camp is out Oliver Lake, and then we just recently, I think the last little bit was doing it at your son's llama farm that the
No, alpaca.
alpaca. I was
See, I listened.
see, I was always thought it was because we called it Llama Palooza, but yeah, they're right. They're all alpacas. So
I guess
Llama Palooza sounded better, but
then alpaca palooza, I guess. So
and we
you
had
do
yeah,
Oh, go
we
ahead,
had
Del.
a different bands there. Jim, you had you and your partner there. I think there was a gospel bluegrass sort of band that was there, and then there was Brent, your son, and your grandson, my brother, and myself. There went up and played played a set there, and so it was interesting. And there was other ones there as well.
All right. Well, I'm going to do you, like I said, 3 verses in the chorus.
Is this
Sounds
a
good.
bluegrass song, Jim?
What's that?
Is this bluegrass?
No, this is what the people down in the Rio Grande Valley in these trailer parks and RV parks and whatever is. I mean, they love all kinds of music, rock and roll,
Mhm.
Country music, but
Mhm.
this song is a humor song.
Right.
And
It's not going to get us kicked off YouTube, is it?
people used to come to my shows and they would just crack up. So here we go.
Okay,
with
but it's not going to
Blonde
get
and
us
Red.
kicked off YouTube, right? It's pretty clean that we can sing it. I guess so.
Now me and Joe took my old truck to the bowling alley last night. He was drinking Coca-Cola and I was drinking Pepsi Diet. We both stopped to have a look when the place got deadly quiet. Was a blonde and a redhead, and they looked like dynamite. They looked like Playboy models, right from that centerfold. We were both wondering why they came in here to bowl. Our knees turned to butter when they walked up to our lane. Our stomachs turned to jello, and we had mush for brains. They said, "Is this lane taken?" They asked Joe and I. When Joe answered, "Duh, duh, duh," well, I thought that I would die. I told them that it was all right, that the lane was free. Then Joe, he grabbed me by the arm, and here's what he said to me. I got dibs on the redhead, but Jim, you can have the blonde. She looks like she could dance for hours and party all night long. She sure is a looker. She really turns me on. He said, I got dibs on the redhead, but Jim, you can have the blonde. So
That was awesome. That was
I'd be
awesome.
curious if anybody out there has ever heard that song before, and if they have and they like it, next time we do a show, I'll do the whole song for them.
Okay, well, I kept asking you, but you didn't hear me. It was clean. I figured it would be, but I thought, well, we better be careful. You never know what could be on a song. But thanks for doing that. That was awesome, Jim.
There you go. Look at that.
I
There
wouldn't
you
do
got
anything else
Zach
but
Man's my fiance's
Yep.
mother would love
Love.
Jim's music. She's a country fan.
There you go. There you go, Joe. There you go, Jim.
Yeah, that's got a bit of a, that's a country
That's
flavor.
a kind of a catchy song, though, and yeah. Well, when you were talking about how people write songs, Zach also added. He said, "I do the same thing when writing comedy material because he's jumped into doing stand-up comedy, which takes quite a few guts. Zach's a pretty funny guy, anyways. He's pretty sarcastic." And so it's interesting you do the same thing. But I guess you're right, because you know what? When you're creative, I said to Del, what Del knows, it's like I can walk into any store and look at a bunch of things just on a shelf and I see it all together, how it'll look. or an idea hits and you grab a piece of paper and you write it down because you know you want to create it, right? So I could see, you know, you doing that in different types of genres. Now, let's talk a little bit about prospecting because a lot of people may not be familiar with what prospecting is, Jim. So, and I know it's changed, but from when you were doing it to what it is now, I'm sure people would love to hear about that.
Okay, well, I mean, prospecting basically involves going out in the wilderness and looking for good rock formations that could hold, you know, economic mineral deposits. Now, there's different kinds of prospecting. There's geophysical prospecting, where you walk through the bush with instruments and measure
Okay.
down the ground. There's prospecting where you go out in the what we call in Canada the bush, where all the trees and the rocks are,
Wherever there's not people living, practically is Canada in Canada.
and you bang rock and you look at the rock and wow, here's some pyrite. I wonder if the pyrite's got anything with it, because a lot of the minerals like copper and zinc, they always have pyrite with them, one form of sulfides or another. So in Canada, the most of the land all belongs to the government, and you can if you have a prospector's license, you can go out in the you can take your tools, your picks and your shovels and that, and go out and your axe and stake a claim, and then you have that right now in the province we live in Ontario. You have the rights to the minerals on that claim for 2 years. And in the old days, we used to cut posts out of claim posts out of trees and put metal tags on them. But recently, the government's gone to a new style, and it's all electronic staking now, where they've covered the whole province with a cell grid system. So now you do your prospecting on the computer. So if you want to get involved in a piece of land where you think there's some minerals, you can go on the computer, give your license number and the location of the claim, pay your $50 per claim, and then you're entitled to go actually on that ground. I mean, you have to get on the ground sooner or later, and bang the rock and see what's there.
Now, with something, with part of this, I'm not sure if this has changed or not. I can't remember when you go out and onto these properties that you picked, and you go put in say a baseline or a picket line. You have to do so many days of work, and then you can carry over the claim for an extra year or something like that for the amount of work that you're doing.
Well, first of all, just the fact that you've staked the claim, you get the mineral rights for 2 years, but you have to do a certain 400 man days of work. And yet that can be by the actual prospecting. It could be by drawing a geological map. It could be by doing geophysics like VLF or horizontal loop, and all of these different types of work. If you blast trenches, you get so many days credit for that. So you have to swear in enough work to keep the claim past the 2 years limit.
Right. And I remember when the first time that I had done went out prospecting with
I should have
you.
mentioned that. Yes, you guys used to work together. Jim was your boss. I didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Del.
Yeah, no, it said that the best stories ever were these crazy prospecting claim rush stories.
That's what I want to hear.
Like I remember the part there where we were in I think the Jacobies when I cut off the end of my thumb, and there's that big huge woolly bush person there with his big huge beard, and he goes, "I'll give you my shirt," and it's had all these rings of sweat salt all over the place there. And Jim goes, oh damn, says, "I have to give you mine. I just took this out of the Hanes bag there, white shirt." Wrap up like something clean. And then I said,
that was the fella from Beardmore.
Yeah, and so instead of doing anything else, I think we were at post number 1 or 2 or something like that. Still had to go to number 3 and number 4 and back to 1 to claim it out, and then back in the helicopter to go back to Thunder Bay to claim to get to the mining recording office, because there's stories about mining recording offices that you told me with planes. But I remember I was in the helicopter with Audrey, your wife, and all of a sudden I'm not sure what company it was there. all of a sudden they had two of the fastest helicopters ever. Just like it looked like we were standing still in the air. They just right by us.
I guess
Well,
it was a rush to get to the offices, right? Whoever got there first
Well, that's
come,
how
first
it
served.
was, right? It was, you had to, whoever got in recorded it first was the one who got the claim. Is that correct? How it used to be?
that's how it used to be, and that would only pertain to situations where you were all after the same claim. If
Right.
they were after different claims, like when we staked at the Oliver Severn, there was a number of claims there, different claims. So, and different people were after that. We weren't all after the same claim. So, in that case, it wouldn't matter if you got to the recording office second or third, as long as you weren't in competition with them for the same claim.
Mm-hmm.
If you were all recording a different claim, but it's when you're all after one claim that has the gold showing on it or the copper zinc showing, whatever, that's where the faster helicopter comes in.
Right.
The Hughes 500D is known to be, I had one that was faster than a Hughes 500D, but I had to pay a premium for it. It was Bell 222, and it's a special jet helicopter that they in Thunder Bay we have one with the Orange ambulance service, and those babies can really motor.
Mm-hmm.
The one
But go ahead, Bill.
Since I remember you telling me of a situation or a story was everybody was going after the same claim, and I think they had to get to Kirkland Lake, and somebody was landing over here with cars waiting for them, and other ones over here by this place to get there, and everybody's trying to find their different things. This is those interesting developments, I guess, with people trying to get these claims or whatever, that when they're fighting over the same property.
Yeah, that was that rush in particular was quite a huge story. There was some of our competition. I was staking the Churchill property, and my partner at the time, Carl Forbes, was staking the Herrick. They both had good gold showings on them. In fact, the Churchill and the Herrick both had mine shafts, and they had some underground development, and the Herrick had actually had a bit of production. And so we cut a helicopter pad up on a sort of a bench on the hill there, where the rock went up and then it flattened off and then it went up again, and I call that a bench. And we cut a helicopter pad there, and in order to prevent anybody else from landing there and using our helicopter pad, we put up a tent, and we hired a kid from the that was tree planting for Shania, who that's what her career turned out to be when she was raising her siblings.
Wow.
He was a tree planter, a contract tree planter for the government. And so we hired this kid. I forget how much money he was getting paid, but we told him when we met him in the bar there, we said, well, we'll pay you 3 times as much, and all you have to do is sit in this tent. And he's like, all right, let's go. So the thing was that this other company from Timmins came along, and they took their helicopter and they went right down, and they didn't know there was somebody inside the tent.
Oh
They
my
blew
goodness.
the tent and all the cooking utensils all over the place. And when the tent finally blew over, they were pretty surprised to see a fellow sitting there. I mean, that it could have been pretty dangerous.
Yes.
But so that was on the Herrick where we did that, and then in the Churchill, that's where I had that high-powered Bell 222, and we were up against 5 other mining companies, and it was unfortunate because they shoot off a shotgun at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that's a signal for everybody to start running and going around the claim and blazing their line.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, the ministry was there with a helicopter hovering over top to like a referee in a hockey game to make sure that everybody played fair by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And there was egg on somebody's face because they started a couple of minutes early and they didn't realize that the ministry had that helicopter up.
Oh.
And they come running out of the bush into a big swamp area, and it wasn't even 7 o'clock yet. So, I mean, right away they were identified and disqualified from being in the race.
That was the whole thing. That's the stories that I remember that sounded so interesting to me. Well, the characters you meet in the bush are interesting enough. They all have the really interesting lives and stuff like that. But yeah, like some of these people that were prospecting, they go and get some Joe Blow from the whatever the bar or the town that's by there, get him a prospecting license. Says, hey, you start 5 minutes early because they know the ministry's out there watching all this stuff. And they go, okay, well, you start off here, and then everybody's sort of looking around. Do I start now or whatever? Like, do I go just to get people disqualified in that? But I think the one that, I guess the other part I was remembering was that part about there's the big race of the vehicles. They get all the way down to the mining recording office. Who's going to get in the door first to get in there because they're all going after the same claim.
Well, the one thing
like
I was going
movie.
to one thing I was going to bring up that my brother is a hunter and fisherman. I mean, I've been out in the bush, but not out in the bush. And I'd always heard the stories about mosquitoes and black flies and stuff. And then one time I was seeing this guy and he took me, God, we were only about 45 minutes out of the city into the bush. And then I realized that every story I'd ever heard, you couldn't, honestly, people, if you have mosquitoes, you will not believe this. This is, and then we're going to get into the black flies and the deer flies because the mosquitoes, you had to wear a mask over your face, like a mesh mask, like if you were beekeeping, because they would go up your nose, in your eyes, in your face. And then with black flies, they bite, don't they? The black flies?
Everything bites.
Yeah. And well, I know black deer flies will take a chunk out of you, but you guys want to, let's share with people how bad the black flies are. I think, Del, there's a picture of you, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I had a picture that Jim had taken before there. I don't have the picture anymore. We were doing I think we were outside of Beardmore. I think you'd got these two guys from Toronto to come up to help stake some claims, and they got all the way out to the bush. They got out of their car, and they about 5 minutes. The black flies were so bad they jumped back in their car and they left and they went back to Toronto, and the rest of us had to go out and stake.
Yeah, but like you're talking like almost like I remember you were telling me this the other night, Del,
Clouds.
like on the prairies, like Canada has everything in the way of probably like many places in the States as well, but in the prairies, right, you can see for miles. Didn't you say, Del, there was like a black cloud? Jim, I think Jim, you were telling him about this.
That was a story there. Yeah, Jim knows more about this. There,
yeah,
they drive animals nuts.
Yeah, in the old days, a lot of the prospectors hauled their gear like in the Yukon and northern British Columbia and that with horses. And you know, if a prospector saw the black cloud coming, he would instantly make his horses lay down and get out a tarp and cover them with a tarp, because when that black cloud got to the location where they were at, if those black flies got into the horses, like if the horse was just standing up and and he wasn't covered, they would get into the nostrils and into the ears, and they would start biting. And you know, I mean, they're bloodsuckers, so they
hurt. Mm-hmm.
And you know, it would drive the horse crazy, and he'd start running, and then of course the flies would just. And eventually, the object of that lesson is for the flies want to try and make this horse run and run till he drops, and then you know he's a carcass. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's
And
incredible.
It's merciless in a lot of ways. All the years I worked in the bush, eventually you sort of get you sort of develop an immunity to these things.
Mm-hmm.
I
sort of acclimate.
Yeah, that's right. You sort of get used to them, but you know, a lot of people put on fly dope and that. I very rarely wear fly dope anymore. First of all, it irritates my skin and some of the brands, and second of all, you know, I've just got to the point where the flies don't bother me. But that reminds me of a story one time. A fella from Kirkland Lake, Johnny McToe, we called him Copper Johnny, really, really nice fella. And he wanted to learn the ropes about our business. So he said to me, he said, you know, I've worked for this company, Schneider's Wieners, for all his life. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to know more about the stock market, the junior mining company stock market, and working in the bush. And he said, you know, would you be able to teach me those things? And I said, well, the best way is pack your gear and I'll pick you up and we'll take you down to Shining Tree to the camp and put you to work. And you'll learn, by hands-on experience what it's all about. So one day he and I were washing off this big outcrop with the power hoses, and I started up the pumps, and John was on the hose, and he was washing the dirt off. And of course, there's a special technique to washing as well. But I went off mapping the geology, and I left John there for about half an hour, I guess. And when I came back, he was standing there, and he was still on the hose. And the problem was that you need the two hands. These hoses are really strong and really pushing out a lot of water. And you can't take a chance and let the hose go to start swatting the flies.
Oh, no.
When I came out of the bush part into the clearing where the rock was being exposed, John was standing there and he had these horse flies all over his face, biting him.
Oh.
And of course, he couldn't let go of the hose to try and cull them away. And I thought, oh my God, John, here, I'll give you a hand. And I ran over there and I saw big tears rolling down his cheek. It was like paid torture.
Oh, I can't even imagine. Think about it though, like Del and I have many interesting conversations when we're not on air. And, and I don't mean any disrespect, but most people do not realize what hard work is. Like you said, we're even, like you said, talking about the prospecting, what it was versus what it is. And you were talking about blazing the line. A lot of people, I know what it is because with being with Del for so many years, he's talked about it, but maybe you might want to explain a little bit about what that is compared to, like you said, everything's electronic. Eventually you're going to have to get out there. But what you guys actually had to do, and never mind, like you said, the bugs, there's wild animals out there. There's all kinds of things. So what happens when you're blazing the line, Jim, so people can understand what that is?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that there's certain times of the year that are the best to be in the bush. And that's in the early spring before the flies come out.
Yeah.
And in the late fall, when it's, you still get some nice days and the flies will come out a bit during the day. But those are great times to actually be out in the bush working. And it's the same with the, it starts in the morning where you start sharpening your axe and you have a file and you take any nicks out of the blade of your axe and then you use your whetstone to hone it. I mean, I used to have an axe. My pet name for my axe was Razor Sharp, Old Razor Sharp. I called my axe. And I had Old Razor Sharp with me when the time that the timber wolf came after me and attacked me.
Oh, now you got to tell people about that one. You got to tell people about that. And usually we talk about scary things in my show, like things like the paranormal and stuff. Well, this is real life here, but because I didn't even know this till I met Del, and he said, Laura, the wolf that you see is not the one you got to worry about. So go ahead, Jim, share this story. You can explain maybe why the wolf you see isn't the one you don't have to worry about or you shouldn't be concerned with?
Well,
excuse me.
Obviously the animals, it's their home and, animals are either going to try and protect their young. If you come along like a mother bear with cubs, there's nothing as
vicious
daunting as running into a mother bear with cubs. First thing she does is she makes a certain noise and the cubs will obviously climb up a tree. They're almost from birth, they're good climbers. And it's the same with a mother moose. If you come on a mother and a newborn calf, you better be very, very careful. Make sure you clear out of there as quickly as possible. And it's the same thing with wolves. The incident, the story that I have about the wolf attack is it takes about an hour to tell it, but so, we'll save that for another time. But basically, this wolf caught me laying down, eating my lunch. And I certainly wasn't expecting a wolf to come after me by any means. And the wolf was running. The wolves, just like the rabbits. The rabbits have trails that go through the bush. And that's how you snare a rabbit. If you're looking to get a rabbit for lunch or supper, you see where their trails go through the underbrush, and then you set your snare there because they will always run on those trails.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they'll get caught in a snare. And the wolves have runs as well. They alongside the rivers and the creeks and that where they run because they know that that's where the caribou and the moose are going to be feeding
Right.
down in the creeks and so that's what happened to me. There was a wolf running along one of their runs, and it saw me laying down, and I guess it thought at first they thought I was a young caribou or some kind of an animal,
Mm-hmm.
and ran right down and started crawling very slowly towards me. So that was quite an unnerving experience. But bears, I know of a lot of prospectors that have had run-ins with bears, and some humorous stories over the years. Uh, and especially in the fall when the moose are mating, that's when you don't want to agitate a bull moose because he'll come right after you. And there was one fella just out of Thunder Bay here that he was bow hunting, and he called the moose in, and the moose came over towards the bush where he was hiding, and it started thrashing the bush with his horns, his rack, and he caught the hunter. The hunter couldn't go anywhere. He was sort of stuck in that little camouflage area, and it
Mm-hmm.
got a tine right in the chest here, and it didn't kill him, but it knocked him, it punctured his chest and knocked him out cold.
Wow.
And I mean, the stories about animals just go on and on and on and on. It's it's part of being out there. There's rules. You don't, if you see a mother bear with cubs, you skirt around there, get you back up, get the heck out of there as quickly as you can. Uh, there, there was one time we were working out of at a lake west of Pelican Narrows in Saskatchewan, and the drillers they had gone back into camp to get something, and when we got there, the drillers used to have a bottle with acid in it, and it would be they would use that acid in the when you want to measure down the hole, they put a test tube down there and they put acid in it, and they let it sit for about 20 minutes and then pull it back up, and then it'll tell them what angle the hole is being drilled at. And apparently what happened, well, they were gone. Myself and my helper, we were doing geophysics at the time, and we came out by the drill. I thought the drillers were there, so we walked over. The machine wasn't running, but I thought they were just fixing something. So we walked over by the drill, and there was no men there. And my partner said Dale was his name. He pointed up and he said, "Hey, look, there's a cub up in that tree." And I'm like, "Oh, if there's a cub,
Back up.
there's a mother around here somewhere." And what had happened was pretty soon I discovered that the plastic jug with the acid in it, that she'd got into that and bit into it. And I could hear her down in the swamp. She had got the acid in her mouth.
Oh no.
She had gone down in the swamp and thrust her head into the water and the muskeg and the muck, trying to get relief from this acid that would be chewing at her face or jaw.
Oh my God.
And what does my partner do? He hauls off. He's carrying a little 22 in his pack sack there. He hauls off and he shoots at. There's two cubs actually, and when we got there, the second one ran up the tree. One was already up there. He shoots one of these cubs, and the cubs start screaming. And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
I mean, Dale, man, are you insane? Like,
Why would you do that? Oh my goodness.
some people are unexplainable, unfortunately.
That's why I
So
said
right away,
there's so many interesting people that you meet in the book.
I can't. I'll tell you, I would have wanted to take that gun and shoot him myself because I call myself. I don't get angry, but don't you come after my kids. Don't come after my kids, or you see the mother of all grizzly bears.
Yeah. So what I did right away was I climbed a ladder up to the platform on the top of the drill because I did not want to tangle if that mother heard those cubs screaming, or the one cub that he shot didn't kill him, and he's running around in a circle down in the bush there, whining and screaming.
Oh.
And I thought, well, I'm a lot safer way up here on this platform. The drills have a a platform when they're pulling the rods, so the helper has to go up there and help move the rods over. So yeah, there's so many stories. One story I always liked that I heard, there was an old timer in Flin Flon by the name of trying to think of his name. When I was a little kid, Flin Flon was an unbelievable place to grow up.
But Flin Flon's in Manitoba, one of the provinces in Canada, for those that may not understand where Flin Flon is. So
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of hockey players came from there. Who was the famous one? Was it Bobby Clark or was it
Clark, but he was probably the most infamous one.
right?
He's the one that broke that Russian's leg in the Summit series there. Gave him a good slash across the ankle. But yeah, Bobby and my dad were good friends, and I knew a lot of the hockey players because I played junior hockey myself. I didn't go anywhere, but one fella from our A team, I was on the B team of the Flin Flon Bombers. Tracy Pratt, he ended up playing for about 7, 8 different teams in the NHL, National Hockey League, and Bobby Clark was the captain of the Flyers that won 2 Stanley Cups.
I know who Bobby is. Yeah, most people do if you follow hockey.
Yeah, and
So
Reggie.
what I want to ask you very quickly though, Jim, is because like I said, I was listening to one of the shows you did with Dell, and you were talking about all these big names in music, if you will, almost Canadian royalty that you know. So how did you run into these people? Was this through prospecting or through your music career? Because we're talking Bachman Turner Overdrive, the Guess Who. We mentioned Shania Twain. There's Ronnie Hawkins for anybody that may know who Ronnie Hawkins is. How did you know all these people or run into them?
Well, it's quite a long story, but I mean, I started my little musical career up in Flin Flon, and we took my sisters and I had 2 sisters, and we all took piano lessons. But after a while, I got tired of carrying the piano around to parties, and I thought I'd better switch over to a guitar.
Excuse me.
I started playing guitar, and I was in a couple little bands there. One called the Vanguards, and another one called the Bel Airs. We were all Flin Flon guys. Well, we had a trumpet player in the Vanguards that was from out of town, and he was a junior hockey player too. And Morris was his first name, and he was a really nice guy. Played, there's an old song, Apple. How does it go? Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to do that song for a dance song, and he used to play the trumpet in that. And then when I moved from Flin Flon down to Timmins, I got into a band called the Voodoos, and we played for one winter in dances in Timmins. And then the next year, I met a young fella that had an awesome singing voice. So I started up a new band with him, a fellow by the name of Ray Fernier, and we started up a band called the Fallen Leaves. So, we were a traveling band for a year, 2 years. So we played all over northwestern Ontario. We had a circuit there, Noranda over in Quebec, and we were fortunate because Ray was bilingual, so we could play in clubs over in Noranda and Rouen, and like clubs like the Moulin Rouge and different places because Ray could sing, popular French Canadian rock and roll songs, and so that band turned out. We recorded some songs in RCA Victor Studios in Toronto, and we would go down to Toronto periodically to trade in our guitars and our amplifiers and get new. We had a fella, Bob Abbott, that worked for Long and McQuaid, and he was always happy to see us come in the door because then he knew he was going to make a bunch of.
He knew you were going to spend cash.
And we would also go up to Yorkville, and we had to be in style, so we had to buy paisley shirts and peppermint pants and.
Okay, so is this the late 60s, early 70s then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be in the mid to late 60s, and so, like for instance, that's how I met Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins. Was down on Yonge Street, and he played at the Cock Door. And one trip when we came down there was a fellow playing black gentleman by the name of Bo Diddley, and of course,
Bo Diddley. Wow.
My signature song in the band, which went on for about half an hour, I started off with singing Bo Diddley, and I can't do it anymore, but the high part where you go, "Hey, Bo Diddley," and then the band sings, "Yeah, Bo Diddley," and then that famous swampy rock beat that Bo Diddley had, that bum pa bum pa bum 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 pa bum pa bum
Yeah.
bum bum. I mean, that was a classic beat that a lot of people have picked up on over the years and made songs out of it. Well, Bo Diddley was playing at the Cock Door one time, and I don't know if Ronnie owned the Cock Door or not,
That's
but
quite the name.
yeah, well, in French it's the Golden Rooster,
Hmm.
COQ apostrophe or COQ D apostrophe
Oh, the
OR.
Golden Rooster. That's what
The
it says in
rooster
French. It's in French. Okay, now I got it. I
rooster
speak French,
stole the
so.
Cock Door.
Mhm.
And Bo Diddley was more than friendly with us. But we had a major problem with our band because there was five of us, and two of the younger fellows, the lead guitar player and the bass player, were both only 16.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so a lot of people were reluctant to let us into the bars because obviously if they got caught with these young fellas in the bar.
Yeah.
But anyways, Ronnie was pretty good about it, and he seemed to either own the place or run the place. He certainly entertained there himself, Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins. And I'm happy to say that I've been able to reconnect with him and his wife, Wanda, again. And so we
Nice.
got a little correspondence thing going on back and forth. But Ronnie was, sometimes Ronnie gets, I don't know how to say it, bad press, I guess, because he was a character and, maybe used a little bad language. He was from Arkansas and he came to Canada, and Canada turned out to be his oyster. And, he had a certain sense of humor and a certain attitude about things. And he had all these Arkansas. That's why part of the reason why I started off with that Blonde and the Redhead, because that was a song that came out of Arkansas as well. And
Cool.
could recognize talent when he saw it. And of course, he hired Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm, who was also an American, and the rest of the fellas that it was Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks. They
Hmm.
were the Hawks. And so, they we were all a big musical community hanging around the Cock Door. And then up on the second floor, there was called the Hawk's Nest. And the Hawks would play up there with Ronnie sometimes, or they would play themselves. And Canada was in an amazing period of evolution in the mid to late 60s. Like I'd been in England back in the 50s, in the late 50s, and I'd heard Lonnie, what was his name? Lonigan, Ronnie Lonigan or Lonnie Lonigan, and the Skiffle Band. And they had a certain sound that, well, I was listening to Johnny Cash and anything that was on the hit parade in those days, but I could tell that there was this sound developing in Britain. And of course, it spilled over into the Stones and the Beatles and all the
Mhm.
other bands that came out of England in the early 60s. And unfortunately, part of that era, I was stuck in the bush, but I always used to tell everybody I worked in the bush wanted to hear Buck Owens and the Buckaroos or Johnny Cash. And I'm like, no, no, the Beatles are the next best thing. Take my word for it. These
Hmm.
guys are, Jim, you're crazy. You're crazy. Like, the Beatles, who would call their band the Beatles? So anyways, then up on the top floor, Ronnie had some offices and he also had a gym up there. And the thing about Ronnie that I always appreciated was, we weren't making huge amounts of money, and what we were making, we'd spend on amp,
Booze. Oh,
guitar,
equipment.
guitars, and gas to get all the way down from Timmins down to Toronto, and on clothes. And so Ronnie let us sleep. Yeah, he said, "You guys got sleeping bags?" Of course. I'll let you sleep in the offices. Some of them weren't finished yet, and he said, "I'll let you sleep in these." You have to sleep on the floor, but a hotel room was 30-40 bucks in those days.
I wish nowadays.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just booked a hotel in Toronto for the mining convention, and they told me, depends which day you want to show up, Mr. Paris. They said some days it's $400 a
Yeah.
night, as high as 1,000. I'm like, what?
Hmm.
$1,000 a night. That's crazy. But
Unless you're
anyway,
traveling with Dell's friend Marty. Marty can always find.
Willie.
Well, I haven't traveled with Willie, but I've traveled with Marty, and they're not highfalutin hotels there, but you know what? You just need a bed. That's it, or something to sleep, somewhere to sleep with a roof over your head.
well, that's fine for me. I mean, I've lived in fish shacks and picked mics off my chest in the middle of the night and fired them up against the wall. Some of these things that you get, buildings that you get into are they're they're infested by mice and skunks and bats and everything else. But I really appreciated Ronnie letting us sleep in his offices. And I
Mhm.
remember one night we were down the strip there, and we were playing with these. There was a black blues band, and my guys were really into the blues. Both Danny Cricini and Barry Lewis, our lead guitar player, and they were such talented guys. I mean, make make me cry for the talent that they had. They both had perfect pitch. Danny had already completed grade 10 conservatory by the time he was 16, and we got him in our band. And Barry, he would just had a knack for playing the licks on the guitars. You can hear Dell when you listen to Little Liar there that we recorded. You'll hear his licks on the guitar, and for a 16-year-old kid, that was fantastic.
Mhm.
So we were down till about 4 o'clock in the morning playing with this band, and I used to like to try some of the blues songs are just three chords, and I can play the bass. So I was getting a kick out of playing the bass that night. About 4 o'clock in the morning, we came back, and Ronnie or somebody had given us a key to get in. And we went up and went to bed. And about 10:30 in the morning, I could hear this. I woke up and I could hear bam, 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 bam. I'm like, what? What is going on? So, of course, we're sleeping in our gotchis, and it's okay to say that, is it, hon?
It's
Oh yeah, for
okay to say
sure.
And I stagger out of the room there, and
it. Just
still
no
have
F
to
bombs. That's it. Everything else pretty well safe.
stagger out, down the hallway, out into the gym, and I can see two fellas boxing in the ring there, and they're going at it, bam, 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 bam. And I go over to the ring, and I didn't have my glasses on, and I look, and I can see the one fella wearing headgear was Ronnie Hawkins, and the other fella that he was boxing with, sparring with, was George Chavallo.
Oh
Oh, I
yeah,
know who
yeah.
George is. He had hands the size of shovels.
Yeah,
Didn't he
And
hit?
actually, yeah, I met George Chavello. He became when I was taking my ironworker apprenticeship for 721 down in
You guys are
Toronto
gonna
when I
have
was
to
living
tell him
there.
who George is, though, because
Yeah, the
unless you're
Canadian boxer, and
Canadian Muhammad Ali, who
well,
hit harder than Muhammad Ali.
that's what Muhammad Ali said. Is that the only guy that hit me harder or that I remember is George Chavello.
Mm-hmm.
and George Chavallo was never put down.
Yep.
Nobody knocked him down.
Hmm.
He could take a Croatian guy, McTow there, Johnny Tomac. He
Yep.
was Croatian as well, and he told me that we used to see George when I got back into the mining business later. We used to see him in the office there. His lawyer was Larry Stone, and my lawyer was Glenn Erickson, and we would see George, and Johnny would call him Chubalo, and I said, no, Johnny, it's Chavallo. No,
Okay, but how did you get to know Randy Bachman and the Guess Who and all those guys? How did you meet those
well,
guys?
what happened is after I got tired of touring around, and I got married, and we had a little baby girl, Heather Alexis Page Paris, and I can see I'm amazed at these bands that last for years and tour together. Mind you, I guess the money's pretty good and the hijinks are pretty good, but I mean, in my band, we did a lot of crazy things and met a lot of. There were some times we got into some vicious fights in certain towns, and those are other stories. But so then I got into booking, and I started booking bands. And there was an agent in Toronto called Ron Scribner, and he had a company called Big Land Agencies. And I was talking to him, and he said, "This summer, I'm going to put all the bands that work for me." He had about 30 bands working for him. He would book them here and book them there, all over the place, up in the
Mm-hmm.
Muskokas. and he would get a cut, of course. And he said that I'm going to start off this year with David Clayton Thomas and the Boss Men.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, David Clayton Thomas came to Timmins and played my dance. And when I read his autobiography, what happened the night at my dance, he didn't even talk about coming to Timmins in his book. He went right from Sault Ste. Marie to Lorilei. He skipped Timmins altogether because it's an unreal story. I had 12 OPPs hired for security that night. And
People won't know what OPPs are, but they're in Canada, in Ontario. We don't just have RCMP and then provincial police. We have
well, no, they are
sorry,
the provincial police.
sorry, they're the provincial police. I mean municipal. We
city
have
police, like
provincial. They're Ontario provincial police. We're the only ones that have that type of force. So go ahead.
yeah, so I mean, you know, I brought the Guess Who down to Timmins, and afterwards it was, I think it was
So
my,
did you book them? Is that how you met them?
yeah, all these different. Neil Young was playing in a band called the Ugly Ducklings at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and he was, you know, basically just a member of a band, and I brought him up, and I brought that band up, and Wes Dacus and Barry Allen from Edmonton. I remember we had an all black blues band. They were there were several women in the band, and I mean they were really good. And the kids, you know, had never seen that kind of band before. And John Kay and the Sparrow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know that name, John Kay went on to be Steppenwolf in the States.
Mhm.
Ah, okay.
Make my motor run now.
Yeah.
Mhm. Get your motor running, head on the highway. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you got
Well,
it.
that David Clayton Thomas, like that was supposed to. I watched a couple documentaries on him. He became like he was supposed to be the big, huge Canadian star to come out like what goes up, right? That was him, right? Wasn't it?
That was after he went with Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah, spinning wheel.
He actually, uh, what he pulled. Well, I wouldn't say it was him that pulled anything off. They had a piano player with them that was a child prodigy. He played, I think, when he was 8 years old. He backed Ella Fitzgerald or somebody at Carnegie.
Wow.
This kid was a child prodigy, but unfortunately, you know, he got into drugs, and the drugs got the better of him. And he and
Mhm.
David Clayton Thomas wrote a song called Brainwashed. And Brainwashed was the #1 big Canadian hit that summer. And of course, they came to Timmins, and then they left there. They crashed their old truck and came into Thunder Bay, and they missed the Saturday night show. So the promoter held them over till Monday. But when I'd flown back, or I don't know if I drove or flew, but I was in Ron Scribner's office on, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week. And what amazed me when I walked in was there was all these piles of rolled up bills, money, Canadian money, and they all had a tag. This band had played at such and such a place, and there was $500 rolled up there. And Scribner had a deal with all these bands where the money all came to him, and then he went out and he paid their bills, like for their equipment, their guitars and their amplifiers. And so I'm sitting there at this table, and Scribner's saying, "Well, how did David Clayton Thomas do for you up in Timmins?" And I said, "Well, Ron, maybe you shouldn't ask me that question because it was a pretty much of a shit show."
Yeah.
So what caused the 12 or the 12 police people to be there that he didn't write about in his book?
Well, #1 is the very first dance that I ever played in the mine. The McIntyre mine was a gold mine, and later on they found copper down deeper in the mine. And they built this big complex in Schumacher. There was Timmins, and then right next door to that, there was just a little drive about half a mile or so, there was a town called Schumacher, and that was heavily Croatian people in there. And that's actually where I was born, was Schumacher. I was born in the South Porcupine, was 5 miles further east. I was born in the South Porcupine Hospital, but my dad worked at the Coney Orm mine, which was right next to the McIntyre. But this mine made a lot of money, and like a lot of mines do, and rightly so, they built this big complex. It had a curling rink, it had a hockey rink, it had a big gymnasium for basketball, and it was multifunctional. I played in the hockey rink part a few times with my band, but
The
yeah.
12
So
OPP. What happened with the 12 OPP? Why
yeah.
did you need 12?
Well,
Because
first of
Timmins
all,
isn't very big, people. Not very big at all. If you blink, you'll miss it almost. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's grown quite a bit compared to what it
the
was
very
maybe
first
back in the
dance
day.
I played, we were in the middle of the dance, and we didn't have all these lights that we accumulated later on, where the light shone on us, and we had strobe lights going around the auditorium and everything. We were pretty bare bones at the very first dance, and we're playing away there, and I can see the kids are all out there dancing and having a great time. And the guy that controlled the McIntyre that I had the contract with to book the place, he came jumping up on the stage, and I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing up here? And the light switches were behind us. So he fumbled his way past the drums and got over there and turned on the lights. And I thought all the kids were dancing. No, they were fighting. All these fist fights were going on all over the place. In fact, that dance, my first wife, somebody ducked, and another guy threw a punch, and he knocked her out cold.
Oh, no.
And and later on, when I started booking the place steady, the McIntyre Gymnasium, Judge Gardner, who is the main judge in town, uh, all the police forces would have to come there and arrest all these people. I mean, we had French Canadians, we had Croatians, we had English guys, and when they all got together, they all thought they were tougher than the other guys, and they'd start
Mm-hmm.
these huge brawls. And finally, Judge Gardner said, right in the newspaper, he said, "This is a message to Jim Paris. If he wants to continue having his dances, he'd better have them policed, because otherwise I'm going to shut him down."
Oh, okay.
That's a pretty plain message in my mind. And of course, right at that point in time, I was probably making a lot more money in music than I was working in the bush. I think I was
Sure.
paid $30 a day to work in the bush, and I was on one weekend, Friday, Saturday night, I'd be making hundreds of dollars. So that's why I had the 12 OPP there, because I knew that there was a good chance there was going to be a problem. And actually, there wasn't a super big problem that night. But so that's how, and so I'm sitting in Scribner's office, and the phone rings, and he says, "Hello, you're the president of what?" And the guy says, "Oh, I'm in charge of the hall out here in Moose Jaw." And he says, "And what happened? David Clayton Thomas knocked out the janitor? You beat him up?" So right there and then there, this is what Scribner told the guy on the phone in Moose Jaw, where Burton Cummings lives now. He lives with his new wife in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
People might not know who Burton Cummings is, but he's part of the Guess Who, because Randy Bachman, and like I said, from the Guess Who, and then Randy Bachman went on to form Bachman Turner Overdrive, because
Yeah,
really we weren't really on the map. We were a little bit, but not the way those guys put us on the map for Canadian music and Neil Young. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Hit the nail right on the head. And what Scribner told the guy on the other end of the phone, whoever he was, I don't have a name for you. He said, "You tell David Clayton Thomas that he will never work in Canada again. Never, because I control all the venues pretty well."
Mm-hmm.
And up until just a few years ago, he never did. And he went to New York, and he met the guy that had Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and they hooked up, and they saw the value of his style and his voice.
Mhm.
They formed Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and that's where Spinning Wheel and all those other songs came out. And Blood, Sweat, and Tears, they sold millions of records. But David Clayton Thomas did get to work because Scribner went out of business eventually, and the Thunder Bay Blues Society booked him and brought him here a couple of years ago to Thunder Bay.
Yes, my brother is part of that. My brother, I always say, is the one that got the musical talent. I got the creative talent, but my brother does play blues and jazz, and He's opened for like Colin James and played with some of the bigger names in blues and stuff like that. Not my style of music, so but he's got a couple albums and
My sister taught Colin James.
excuse me.
She taught school in Regina, and Colin James was one of her students.
Yeah.
So
See, now people might not know who Colin James is. He just blew up hugely in the late 80s, early 90s, and he got back into blues and he's touring again right now. I just seen an ad for him. And
okay.
he's phenomenally talented guitarist, you guys. If you ever want to look up, I always liked his first album best. What about you, Del? What was your favorite?
The Colin James's first album is really good. But this is another part that's sort of interesting that goes along with Jim's stories is that all the little towns that you've been in there, like Thunder Bay is sort of like the big little town that's in northern Ontario, but Kirkland Lake had some famous people that came out of there. You had Alan Thicke that went on. He had his own,
yeah, I forgot about Alan. Yeah.
You have Paul Schaefer from Thunder Bay that went on to be the musical director for Saturday Night Live and for David Letterman.
Yeah.
And then also, well, there's more. Yeah, Shania Twain from Timmins, a little small little hole in the ground that's sort of in the middle of a highway, in the middle of the bush of the Highway 11 and 17 Trans-Canada Highway. And it's always fun. It's sort of interesting that a lot of famous Canadians, they become famous once they go to the States.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing.
With the exception of Stompin' Tom Connors, he would never sell out and go to the States because he was determined that he was going to put Canada, his style of music, he was going to put Canada on the map with his. Well, he's another. I knew Stompin' Tom from before he was called Stompin' Tom, and in fact, I'm one of the reasons. Myself and the bartender at the Maple Leaf Hotel, why he became Stompin' Tom, because we were playing, my band, the Fallen Leaves, was playing down at the Matagami, and which was another riotous place to play in at times. And one night they said to me, and I used to parade around with a cape at the time. I thought
I love it.
I don't think I thought I was Dracula, but somebody I saw was wearing a cape, and I thought that's pretty cool. So
that's pretty cool.
I'm wearing this cape, and somebody in my entourage there, I had 5 or 6 hangers on, the roadies, whatever, besides the band members. And
they weren't groupies, so they were roadies. They weren't groupies.
Well, we had groupies too.
I'm sure you did.
Anyway, somebody said, you got to hear this guy up at the Maple Leaf Hotel. He's really good for a laugh. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go up there and have a beer. And so they walked in ahead of me, and there was one table was some people were just leaving, so they went right over there, the 5 or 6 people with me, and I came in my cape, and of course I'm walking into the Maple Leaf was a redneck bar, and I'm thinking maybe I should take my cape off
and park it at the door.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a little stage that Tom was singing on, and it was about 6-8 inches off the ground, and it was just made out of rough lumber. It wasn't plywood or anything. And as I'm walking by him, and he's up on there singing a Hank Williams song, because he hadn't written any music yet. He hadn't written any of his famous songs yet. And I look down at the floor there, because he's pounding with his boot, and he's already got about 8 gopher holes, good-sized holes, pounded through these boards.
Good thing he didn't go in a circle. It probably only would have had a few spots left before he would have fell through the stage.
Yeah, these holes were sort of random all over where the boards were pounded through by his boot. And now he was working on my side of the stage, and he was pounding away with his boot. And I'm only a foot away from him, and he gets his boot heel, where he's wearing cowboy boots, gets his heel caught in the in that hole that was right specific to where he was.
He was standing, yep.
Toppling off the stage.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm like, my goodness, this guy's going to break his. If the boot stays in there, and cowboy boots are very.
He's going to break his neck.
Clingy. He's going to break his ankle or break his leg or something. So I grabbed him, and I set him back up, and he said, "Oh, thank you, bye, thank you." for saving. But, and I said to him, I said, if I was you, I'd get a piece of plywood and I'd put it over all those holes,
Holes.
because plywood's a lot harder to stomp a hole through.
Mhm.
And apparently, Lepine, Gaston Lepine, or whatever his name was, I heard he got credit for. I guess he brought a piece of plywood and stuck it on the stage there, and Tom started using that. Then Tom discovered there was a type of plywood. I think it was not birch, but some softer plywood.
Balsa wood.
With his boot heel, it would make the chips fly up. He would
Oh,
actually
jeez.
pound on the plywood.
Mhm.
I've seen videos of him playing down at the Horseshoe or in Toronto, and when he stomps with his boot, there's actually wood chips are flying, and it's sort of a action movie, you know, like
Yeah.
he's pounding away with his boot, and the chips are flying around. And anyway, that night we drank until about 1:30 in the morning, and the girls were cleaning up the ashtrays, and he says, "Hey, bye," he says, I know you're Jim Paris from the Fallen Leaves, and you got records out, and you guys are on CKGB and the radio station. Brody Giles was playing our music there pretty steady. He says, I'd like you to, I just wrote a new song. I'd like you to critique it for, well, he didn't use the word critique. I don't think that was in his vocabulary.
Well, I was just going to stop you for a sec because people probably
Yeah.
would know what buy is, but with Canada and the East Coast, you get some pretty good Newfoundlanders there. It'd be a hard time to understand, but I don't know if he's from Newfoundland or is he from Nova Scotia?
We call it Newfoundlandese.
Newfoundlandese, yeah. So was
Well,
he was from
Stompin'
out
Tom,
east,
he
I
was-
guess, eh?
Stompin' Tom was from Prince Edward Island, actually.
I knew it was out east somewhere because that's where you're
Skinner-
going to get that dialect.
Skinner's Pond, way up in the, that's the corner that's closest to Newfoundland. So
Mhm.
we'll give the Newfies credit. But yeah, that Lord Thunder and Jesus by
Yeah.
doing, like, you know, I mean, that's a Lord Thunder and Jesus. That's a famous Newfie expression. But so we go up to his room, and I'm going to critique this song for him, supposedly. So we get in the room, and he takes off his black vest, sets it on the bed, and he says, "Would you like a cold beer, by?" I'm
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, I like it. That's how I like my beer, cold."
Not warm.
There was two Molson sitting on top of a dresser, and he goes over there and he grabs one of those beers, and they're in those rooms in the Maple Leaf. There was no
Fridge.
bathroom, no
Oh,
toilet,
oh.
but there was a sink. Everybody had a sink. You had to go down the hall to go to the bathroom. So he goes over with the beer and he turns on the cold water tap and he puts it under there for about 20 seconds. And then he snaps the cap off and he says, "Here you go, by." He says, "Here's a nice cold beer for you."
Okay.
I'm like,
Maybe
"Yeah."
the first quarter of an inch.
So I sit on the bed and he grabs his guitar. And I don't know if you remember Peter Townshend from the Who.
Yeah.
Yep. Peter Townsend. Yeah.
Windmill thing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Tom and Tom knew who Peter Townshend was, but he may have. But anyways, he winds up with this. He's got his guitar and he's got his hat off and his vest off, and he winds up and he does this windmill. He goes chang like this,
Mhm.
and I'm like, holy smokes!
Mhm.
And he starts singing this song. "Hello, rubberhead, goodbye, boob. Go in. I got a brand new jubie jube. Hello, rubberhead, and goodbye, boob." And as I was going out the door, I said, "Yeah, sure hit, Tom. Yeah, great song. Yeah, really enjoyed that one." So I got out my car, drank my beer on the way home. And next thing you know, he was Stompin' Tom. And the next thing you know, he came out with the Fire in the Mind song. And next thing you know, and the one thing that was really funny was during the Texas Gulf Rush in Timmins, when they found a huge Kidd Creek mine, which is still producing today. Texas Gulf Sulfur came to Canada and had to find a mine right in our back, a huge base metal mine, world class, one of the biggest mines in the world, right in Timmons's backyard.
Mhm.
And all the geologists we'd get together. Well, I wasn't a geologist then, but we'd get together at the Empire Hotel, and all these guys that worked in the mines that were geos. I mean, my dad was a geo, and I knew Ron Bradshaw and a lot of guys who were geologists. And they'd say, You'll never find a base metal mine around Timmins. This is gold country. All we got here is gold. And
Mhm.
what do? 17 miles from Timmins, find one of the biggest mines in the world. But during the exploration program, where there was dozens of companies, promoters, coming into Timmins, flogging their stocks, and there was all sorts of bush camps all around in the townships, out,
Mhm.
in the logging roads and that. And after I introduced Stompin' Tom to the people at the radio station and the people we recorded, he got himself a little 15-minute radio show on CKGB. And so we'd be laying in our bunks and in a camp somewhere out there where we were working. And Stompin' Tom would say, and I want to thank Joey Lapine there, for sending in his dollar to get a request here. And I'm going to sing him a special song. And Joey Lapine's laying in the bed across from me, and he says, "What the hell? I never sent any money in."
Did
This
you?
was a joke thing that people were
Yeah.
pulling on each other. They
Yeah.
would send in somebody's name in camp there, and
Okay.
to send the dollar in, and Stompin' Tom would say his name on the radio.
Yeah.
But it wasn't long after that, and of course, I ran into Stompin' Tom many times over the years, and we'd always have a little laugh about the old days and a little kibitz. And then Brent's mother there, she didn't believe that I knew him. I mean, he got
Brent is his son, for those who use that. He grew up almost like an adopted. Well, Del says his last name on here now, Lessie, but one of
Brent,
the Lessie boys. Yeah, he
that's
almost grew up.
Brent Lessie. He was always down at the Lessie's house there.
His
Yeah.
last name, for people listening, really isn't Lessie.
Yeah.
He grew up at Del's house practically.
Well, we call him Brent Paris, whatever you want to call him. But
Yeah.
anyways,
His mother didn't
Or you
believe
just-
that
they're
you
just-
knew. Oh,
his
go ahead.
mother
Call
said
him just call him
Mother-
Cooter. That's it.
Cooter.
Yeah.
Brent was
Okay.
cooler.
Yeah. Well, David and Brent were both Cooters. They just
Oh,
spelt it differently.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I won't ask you anymore about that.
One night, Stompin' Tom was playing at the college, and I was the chairman of the trades programs at the college. So I said, Norma, I said, come on tonight. I'll introduce you to
Yeah.
Stompin' Connors. So after the show, we went. He was signing autographs and selling records up on the stage there, and I went up, and he had his head down, and he looked up, and Lord Thunder and Jesus, where'd you come from, Mike? I haven't seen you for years. And I'm saying, Tom, I'd like you to meet my wife here. And
Yeah.
so then I guess after that, we had a big long chat, and that Martin Hartwell story thing came up, where Tom had written the ballad of the Martin Hartwell, the pilot that crashed. Del, we had that on your show, didn't we?
I
Yes,
wanted
yes, we
to
did.
talk about it because you know
Yeah.
what? We usually throw things. Are you comfortable talking about? Because I think this
Well,
is
the thing
really
is,
interesting.
If people want, well, you can tell a little bit of it there. I gotta go check the dehumidifier downstairs there because it's making noise, and I think I can hear it through the headphones.
I wondered
But
why you kept
yeah,
coming.
but if people want to check it out, last week's show on Thursday with Jim, we talked about the Martin Hartwell story, and it's
Well,
a
let's-
very interesting story. So I'll be
Jim,
back in a second.
Jim, feel free to tell it on here because I think people will find this interesting.
Well, Martin Hartwell was a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
and he unfortunately took a Mercy flight from Cambridge Bay up in the NWT, the Northwest Territories, as we know them to be. What we just call it the NWT. And he was flying from Cambridge Bay to Yellowknife, and this nurse had hired him. She worked for the territorial government up there. I'm trying to think of her name. Judy Hill was her name.
Mhm.
Judy Hill. And Hartwell was dropping off some people. He was flying a Beech 18 with twin engines. And he was dropping off some, I read they were prospectors. This was in November. So I always wondered what kind of prospectors were going to work in November up in the.
Yeah, my God.
But they called them prospectors. So she needed a Mercy flight, and there was no other planes. So she hired him. and there was a pregnant Eskimo woman and an Eskimo boy that was suffering from Davy Kutuk. He was suffering from, I apologize if I haven't got his name correct, but from appendicitis, and the
Mm-hmm.
pregnant Eskimo woman was expecting this baby. So Judy Hill hired Martin Hartwell, and they took off from Cambridge Bay, and partways down to Yellowknife, they were engulfed by a huge snowstorm. And first of all, Hartwell wasn't qualified to fly with instruments, and in a snowstorm, like
Right.
some planes can fly through a snowstorm if they
You have to
can.
know what you're doing, though.
Yeah, you got to know where the ground is. And
Mm-hmm.
second of all, his plane, the instruments in his plane weren't really qualified either for flying blind. So he
Mm-hmm.
tried to turn and fly out of the snowstorm, assumedly, and he flew into the side of a hill,
Oh.
crashed, and the nurse was killed on impact, and the Eskimo woman either died shortly afterward. I don't know if she was killed. I mean, nobody knows, I guess, except Martin Hartwell, and he's passed away now. But he was in the bush there with the two dead women and the little Eskimo boy for 31 days. And the Eskimo boy was the one that responsible for keeping him alive there for about 23 days. And then the Eskimo boy died. And then after that, Hartwell was on his own.
But how
So
did they stay alive? That was the part that was really, really
yeah,
creepy. But mm-hmm.
that's right. Well, the Eskimo boy, I mean, they ran after a day or two. They ran out of whatever food rations the plane would have had on it, and so there really was no choice. And I personally have never uh, faulted Hartwell if I was
Mm-mm.
in that position myself. So he instructed the Eskimo boy to take strips of flesh off the nurse's body and boiled him in a pot of water, and that's what he ate to stay alive. The Eskimo boy wouldn't eat the flesh of the nurse, and he ate tree bark.
Do you know why he wouldn't eat it? I have an idea. I know why he wouldn't eat it. Do you know
Well,
why?
customs, I don't know.
No, there is an indigenous legend of that if you eat the flesh of another human being, so even if they passed or in a situation like this, there's the legend of the Wendigo.
Oh
So
yeah.
what? Yeah. So I
Oh,
bet you that's probably why he wouldn't. I was just saying. I don't know if you heard that. Big Jim was saying that the Eskimo boy wouldn't eat the flesh; he would only eat the tree bark. And I said that's probably because the legend of the Wendigo.
Yeah, well, that's a big talk there through all the native tribes throughout
Mm-hmm.
North America. That is it's almost like a black magic or black voodoo or witchcraft or something like that, and it taints your soul.
Taint your soul. You live forever, but you're ever hungry and become vicious and completely inhuman. And it's a pretty awful story. So I bet you that's probably why the young boy wouldn't eat it. Sorry, I cut you off with your story when Dell came back.
But the thing is though that you have to just say is that Martin Hartwell, I guess he didn't get the
Didn't
curse of
become
the
a Wendigo.
Wendigo because you said he passed away.
well, the thing that upset me about that was that he crashed with my father back in 1969 on a Titty Lake where we had a camp, and that was the story that I told on Dell's show last week. And really, I mean, his name at that time was Leopold Hermann. He'd flown in the
Oh.
Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, at the end of the Second World War,
Mm-hmm.
because he was quite young. I think he was only about 18 at that time. And
Was
he
he part
came
of
to
the
Canada.
SS?
Beg pardon?
Was he part of the SS, the Nazis back
No,
then with
no,
the name of Leopold? No?
no, not the SS. The Luftwaffe was the German Air Force, but they had nothing to do with the SS. The
Okay.
SS were the
Nazis.
real nasty characters.
Mm-hmm.
But his name was Leopold Hermann. He crashed with my dad. That crash was just totally irresponsible and stupid. And it was fortunate that he didn't kill my dad. I know for a fact my dad would never fly in a bush plane again. We used to have our own plane, and my dad was a pilot. I always said if I had enough money to buy a plane, I got enough money to hire a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
from my point of view. But I mean, I did fly planes over the years, uh, off and on myself. But
Why did he change his name, Jim?
well, this is what nobody knows, and nobody knows this story because I've never told it before. That he was fired from that job because flying with my dad for Parsons Airways, and he just disappeared, and we didn't know anything about him until they brought him out of the crash site. And all my stories have all these arms and legs attached to them, and so I haven't got time to tell it all tonight. But when they brought him back to Edmonton and brought him up to the gate, I was watching it on TV, and at the time, anytime there's a plane crash, I've flown in so many planes and helicopters,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a real empathy for people that crash, and I know a lot of people that have crashed and survived and crashed and died, and I have a lot of stories like that. But anyways, where was I going? Oh, they brought him
Oh,
to
yeah.
they brought him to Edmonton, and when they brought him to the gate, I mean, by this time he'd grown. He must have had a bit of a beard before because he wouldn't have been able to grow such a big beard in a
Mm-hmm.
month. But he had this big black bushy beard, and as they brought him right up to the gate, the camera sort of zoomed in on him, and I'm looking at his eyes, and I'm like, why are they calling this guy Martin Hartwell? That's Leopold Herman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I jumped on the phone. I called my dad. I said, Dad, are you watching the news? He said, Yeah, I can't believe it either. That's
Wow.
that's Leopold Herman, the guy that crashed with, almost killed me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, that's the mystery was that the only way he could get another pilot's license was, there's a woman that he took up with in Canada here. He had a wife and a son back in Germany. I don't know if he ever divorced her or not, but his original wife. But I think her name is Haley,
Mm-hmm.
Judy Haley, or Mary Haley, or something, some name like that. I think she would still be alive, and if she may have the answer to this, the perplexion here, the perplexing situation, why he may. I would think that he would have been disbarred from flying ever
Well,
again.
that was the part that we discussed on my show there, and my sort of idea is that maybe he knew somebody that was named Martin Hartwell that was a pilot, because the thing is was that to become a pilot you have to pass so many hours, you have to do all these hurdles to go through till you can actually fly
Mm-hmm.
with people and be a registered thing there. And I was sort of I haven't looked into it much more than that, except from the last show, because I've been so
That
busy
would
with
make
work.
sense, so Dell, because you know what, if he had the experience, albeit not great experience, it sounds like, and luckily your dad survived at the time in that first crash. But if he did, like you said, say Dell, take on the name of somebody, Martin
That was a
Hartwell, maybe.
pilot, because you
Well,
have
that's
to
what I
be
was going to
registered.
say. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
That's
that's what I was
the
going to
most
say.
Dell's theory is the most sensible
I
uh,
think so too.
thing that I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
except for the fact that when he surfaced, he was way up in the Northwest Territories and in the Arctic. That's where he commenced his flying career, and then Dell and I agreed that sometimes people don't bother asking you for any credentials.
Exactly.
If you can fly a plane and you say, "Well, I've got lots of
Yeah.
experience," and the guy says, "Well, let's go up. We'll take a flight," and goes up and he flies the plane. Okay, you're hired.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
See, but the
counter to Dell's theory there that he took somebody else's.
flying
Identity.
record identity,
Maybe
because
that all fits in together. Maybe that
yeah,
all fits in
Because
together.
there's no computers back then or anything that you'd be using
yeah,
nowadays, right?
no,
Like you said. Go ahead, Dell. Sorry.
but with aviation though, you have to, and this has been going on for a long time, because I used to watch that Buffalo Airways show and stuff like that,
Yeah.
where they'd flying all those old vintage warplanes
Yeah.
through the north, and everything is written down: who the pilot is, who the co-pilot is, who the mechanic is that worked in the plane, how many hours of work was done on there. And so if he doesn't compute that he just made up a name, then he the what is it, the FCC, the flight, they would go and they would pull Buffalo Airways, or they pull the flying.
Flight
I
book,
think
yeah.
they would lose their license. They wouldn't be able to fly if they had an illegal flyer. So that's why I thought this is that he must have known somebody with that name that was a pilot that was still sort of semi-registered and just assumed that and known that he just died, right?
Well, I wouldn't, I think that's the most logical thing that I've heard ever said. But there's a lot of arms and legs on this story. And now jump ahead to 2022, and we've got that plane crash just out of Sioux Lookout there,
Right.
with 4 people on the plane, and they were all killed. And you've seen the credentials on those people.
Well, there's a lot, like you've experienced this. There's a lot of plane crashes, small little planes that have crashed over the place where they've never even found planes, all through northern Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, because people don't realize that are listening to this, and you're in those other 180 countries around the world. There's Canada. Most of the population lives within 100 miles of the Canada-U.S. border. All the rest of it is all just bush.
Yeah, so planes are a great way of getting around.
Yeah, but the thing is that if a plane crashes, that's to go and find these things. Like if you look at our roadway system, like where it's all within that 150 miles of the U.S. border, then there's a lot of nothing out there. That was sort of interesting about staking claims and stuff like that, was that you went out these old logging roads, and hey, you're doing this block, or you had to fly in or helicopter in, and there was nothing around. Like if you got injured out in the bush, you could be a far way away from any type of help.
Well, for sure, no doubt about it. And I mean, that's where my dad stuck me many times on jobs. It was way out in the middle of nowhere, and you had to rely on the other guys. There was I remember one time where I got turned. It was very seldom I ever lost my directions in the bush, and both things happened, as night was coming on.
Yeah.
But I had to depend on some of the other people at the camp to help me get back to camp safely.
Sorry about that, guys.
I remember one time, and this sort of ties in because we talked about Johnny Tomac, and me and Brenton, that we used to always call him Mac Toe, because it was just so much more, sounded more like he was a rap artist. He was a good rap guy, but it was like he was such a good cook there too. When Audrey wasn't making all those delicious meals and lunches for us and stuff like that, and it was me, you, and Mac Toe out there. There was one we were doing around Geraldton, and Geraldton has a magnetite mine that's just outside of there. And I think we were somewhere in between Jellicoe and Geraldton. And it was just what you were saying there. It was getting near dusk. We were staking this huge block out in this cedar swamp. And we all went off in different directions, and we all met back. But it got dark. And it was just throwing off our compasses. We couldn't see the blazes on the trees.
Oh yeah,
or
with
like
magnetite, yeah.
Out. And thank God Audrey was out there in the truck, and she was beeping the horn on the road, because we were sort of walking around, coming back around, because everything was being thrown off because of the mineral, the magnetite.
The magnetic attraction on our compasses.
Yeah, and it was just her out there beeping the horn, like she goes. Well, that's the whole thing about this. Is the whole part about safety that people should know, is that you set times, says, okay, I'm going to be back at this time. When you don't show up for 3 more hours, well, maybe there was an issue, and that's
no, but that's what we started to talk about. Something else about blazing the line. You told me about this, Del, that you made chops sort of in the trees and what way to do it, because like you said, with your compasses not working, what people don't realize is, first of all, when you are out in the bush, it is pitch black. Yeah, you might get lucky with a full moon, but the whole point is, they wonder how people get lost in the bush. It's so easy if you don't mark your trail, isn't it, guys? You can go in circles and go in circles and go in circles, right?
Oh yeah, well, that's what we did that night when we were lost. Till we heard the horn.
Everything looks the same.
That's true.
Well, we got a few more minutes here. Is there something else you guys were talking about? I know you guys were connecting over the last couple of days that you wanted to talk about before we hop off here. Or?
Well, there was a couple things there. I'm not sure if we have time for this story. There was the Garth Brooks concert for Garth Brooks concert story, and I had written down for Monday. You had mentioned something about that.
Oh yeah. Well, we can try and squeeze that in if you want.
Sure.
Let's get rid of this cough candy here. Well, my wife and I used to go down to the Minnesota State Fair. We loved it down there. The music was fantastic. The people were fantastic. It just seemed like a 2-week holiday paradise. We camped right at the water tower. We would go down every day. There was free music, like Creedence Clearwater was playing on one stage, and all these stages were sponsored by beer, Lion and Kugel beer, and
I know, we know what Line and Kugels is.
beer companies. There you
Yep.
go. And
Chippewa Falls.
we saw.
Trying to see. No Line and Kugels on my cup. That's from Rockfest. But go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
We saw people like, the Cajun artists that we'd never heard before. Oh God.
Probably Joe would know who they were. You met Joe Montaldo before we came on. He's the owner of
He would
UPRN. I would
know
give
who
him a
they
shout
were.
out.
They're
Yeah,
all,
he would. Yeah.
yeah. And and then at night they would have the main stage show. The main stage was, the bleachers were all on one side, and at the Minnesota State Fair, which was in St. Paul, Minnesota, there's a big oval racetrack because they have races there as well. And anyways, the first year when Garth came to the fair, we definitely wanted to see him. So we went down and I tried to get tickets, but it was sold out. So we were pretty disappointed. But it was a beautiful night when he sang, and we were out in one of the ramps going up to the entranceway there, and we were with a bunch of other people that couldn't get tickets either. And so we had a real camaraderie thing going on in the middle of the, and it was a warm, nice breeze blowing night, and we could hear Garth singing. And so that was first year. And then the second year, we went down a few days early. See, what happened is they let Americans know what the schedule is and who's coming, and they get the first dibs on tickets. And then 2 weeks afterwards, we get the
leftovers.
We get the program in Canada. So by that time, when we knew, oh yeah, Garth's coming this year, I'd get on the phone. Oh, sorry, sold out again. So we went down a few days later because after all my scalping ticket stays in Maple Leaf Gardens, I figured there's got to be some way we're getting. So if we have to smuggle ourselves in with the luggage or whatever, when the trucks are moving in. So
I'm with the band. Be a roadie.
I went up to the ticket booth there and I said, is there any chance of any tickets? And she said, no, not a chance. We have nothing. And I talked to these two big wrestlers that I have no idea why they were there, but they were obviously ticket scalpers too, but they knew all the ins and outs. And they told me, they said, if you're going to buy tickets from somebody here out in the crowd, if somebody's going to sell you tickets, be very careful because there's a lot of undercover cops here, and they'll pinch you and fine you.
Right.
And worse than that, probably take you to jail, and you'll miss the whole fair.
Right.
And that actually happened to some people, and I was unfortunately a witness to it. But anyways, I went back to another ticket woman and I said, God, we missed Garth last year. Is there anything you can do for us? And she said, well, the only tickets I have left are restricted view. There's a great big iron girder, and you'll be right behind that. So you have to lean into your neighbor's space there and look. And your wife will have to lean into her neighbor's space. And I'm like, okay, I'll take them. How much? $90 a ticket. Here you go.
Oh.
So we're in. We got tickets to get in. So we get in there and we go up. Yeah. In fact, that big beam wasn't this big. It was about this big. And we're sitting there and I'm like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe it.
You'd be leaning into the guy 2 seats over.
So I think to myself, you know what? Maybe somebody got sick. Maybe somebody couldn't make the show.
You're pulling a Dell. I know what you're going to do. Dell does this at every concert.
So I go down, and I go down about 25 rows or whatever, and I'm looking around at the crowd. I'm looking towards the crowd, trying to see if there's a couple seats there that maybe nobody's showing up. And then if they still don't show up after the opening act, then maybe we can move down. So I'm sure pretty much everybody, the concert goers, are all familiar with. There's probably people that are still walk the line.
Okay, so we got about 3 minutes. We got about 2 minutes left. So what happened with this? I don't want to leave people hanging.
Always say, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Well, I'm checking to see if there's any possibility." He said, "Well, if you need us, what's your problem?" And I said, "Well, I'm behind this big iron beam." He said, "Well, why don't you come and sit in here with me?" Like, he's the sound guy, and the sound studio is built right into the cement.
Yeah.
He's got a tarp over top of him. I can't see him, but I can hear him, and he can see me through the little bit of space there. He says, "Why don't you come and sit with me?" And I said, "Well, I got my wife. I was way up in the bleachers." "Well, go and get her." I said, "Are you serious? We can sit with you?" He said, "I got snacks. I got drinks. You're welcome."
What a nice guy.
Yeah, so I'm yelling, "Audrey, Audrey."
Yeah.
She can hear me, but she can't see me because I'm not going. So she comes down, and I reach out through that space, and I grab her ankle, and she says, "Oh my God." I help her get in there. So we sit there for the whole show. Now this is the sound man, and he's got the set list there in front of him, and he knows what song's coming on next, and what he has to do.
Yeah.
So we sit there, we have a few drinks, we eat some chips, and we have pretty well the best seats in the house, because he's got to have a good
the best view. Yeah.
And finally, at the end of the show, I said, "Hey, I can't thank you enough for being so hospitable." And I said, "Is there any chance I can have your set list?" And he said, "Well, I don't know about that." He said, "Garth wrote that himself, you know." And I said, "Oh, fantastic.
I'll take it.
Could I? Yeah. Could I have it?" And he said, yeah, okay. I'll give it to you, a special present to you Canucks. So then I said, then I overdid it. And I said, unfortunately, I, thought I was riding a wave. And I said, "Is there any chance you can get us backstage passes?"
Well, you got to ask, though. You got to ask. That was a once-in-a-lifetime chance there, Jim.
Well, I had got backstage passes for Huey Lewis in another show. And so he says, "Hey, buddy," he says, "come on. Like, I mean, I gave you chips, I gave you drinks, I gave you the set list. You're pushing your luck here." And I said, "Well, yeah, but I got to ask." And he said, "No, but you can do me a favor." He says, "Tell my wife when you go down by the t-shirt stand there that I'm going to be a few minutes late tonight because I got to do some extra chores." Yeah. And I said, "Well, what's her name? I got to know her name because I know there's a bunch of different women working there." He said, "Just ask for Martina." And so when we get down there, I said, "Hey, is there a Martina here?" She says, "Yeah, that's me." I said, "Well, your husband, John, told me that he'll be late." And she said, "Okay, well, John, I'll just wait for him, blah, blah, blah." She opened the next year for Garth Brooks at the fair.
Martina McBride? I knew it when you said Martina. I knew it.
And
there we go. That rounds out the stories there.
John McBride. I hope I see them again sometime, or I hope they hear us tonight.
Maybe they'll hear it. Listen, I want to thank you. I knew this was going to go by too quick. We're going to have you back on again for sure, Big Jim. But I want to give a shout out first to also Deli. Deli, you want to tell them where they can find you and what's coming up on your show?
Yeah, I got Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 Central, The Delicious Recipe. And I'm not even sure what I'm going to be doing this Thursday. It's going to be something anyways.
It's going to be something exciting. And I want to thank you guys. I want to thank Big Jim too. If you ever want to get a hold of me, you got a show idea, you want to book a reading with me, healing session, I do mentoring. You can get a hold of me on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. Also, I have 2 groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things paranormal, and then the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the esoteric, power of positive thinking, and things like that. And Big Jim, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. I guess we got about a second here if you want to play a song. Quickly play us out.
I was born under Bay, Ontario. I kept my daddy in the district jail. Dad said, "Son, better keep your hands clean. Are you gonna hear those OPP on your trail?
There you go.
There you go.